Over the past couple of weeks, we've seen a new focus of Biden administration attention. It's not Hamas, it's something called settler violence. I'll explain what stands behind the headline and what it means about who's calling the shots on U.S. policy towards Israel and Hamas. Coming up on In Focus. This morning, the New York Times ran a story that said that members of what I refer to as the Hamas caucus on Capitol Hill are asking tough questions about an Israeli effort to purchase 24,000 assault rifles from the United States. Now, this isn't part of the $14 billion aid package for military supplies that Israel or that the Biden administration has submitted to Congress for approval. This is separate. This is just purchased by the Israeli government from directly from U.S. contractors, like $34 million, 24,000 rifles, something along those lines. And simply because Israel's a foreign government, it has to apparently be reported or approved by the State Department and reported to the Capitol Hill. So apparently the State Department gave it approval and sent it to Congress just to update legislators about what's happening. And this caused a ruckus. People said, "Oh no, 24,000 assault rifles. Where are they going?" And the State Department said, "Well, Israel says it's going mainly to the National Police Force, and it may also go to communities for civil protection." Well, so the congressional lawmakers concerned about this, that may go to extremist settlers, and we don't want that to allow them to get rifles because that's settler extremism, settler violence, et cetera, et cetera. And apparently there are a lot of people in the State Department that are working with the Hamas caucus on Capitol Hill to block Israel from purchasing the 24,000 rifles. So this isn't that surprising because over the past several days and really over the past few weeks, we've heard more and more and more of this concept of settler violence, extremist violence from Jews in Judea and Samaria. President Biden talked about it in his press conference with Australian Prime Minister Albanese at the White House on October 25th. Secretary of State Blinken talks about it all the time. He never stopped talking about it during his press conference last Friday in Tel Aviv. And we just keep hearing it over and over and over again. Extremist settlers, settler violence, violent extremism from Israelis who live in Judea and Samaria. And a lot of us who live in Judea and Samaria are like, what are they talking about? We don't even know what they're talking about. What settler violence are they talking about? We know, I mean, I was checking what the numbers were. So according to Regavim, an NGO that deals with a lot of these issues, just in the first 6 months of this year, so from January 1st to the end of June of 2023, the Palestinian terrorists committed 3,640 terrorist attacks against Israelis in Judea and Samaria. They led to 28 deaths of Jews and 362 injuries, various degrees. And these attacks run the gamut from roadside shootings, which is how most of the fatalities were caused, to stoning attacks, Molotov cocktails attacks, riots, knifing, stabbings, axings, you name it. So that's just in the first 6 months of the year. And although the data hasn't been completely tabulated, according to Regavim and other sources, there's been a massive uptick in Palestinian terrorist violence against Israeli Jews in Judea and Samaria since October 7th, since the Hamas invasion and slaughter in southern Israel. So there's a very large escalation. And I'll just give you today a testimony that was published on social media from an IDF reservist who was called up on emergency orders in Samaria shortly after October 7th. And so he wrote it in Hebrew, and I thought it was important enough to translate to English. So I'm just going to read you what this reservist wrote. He wrote as follows: the amount of shooting lasers, the wild behavior, that's high beam lasers, that terrorists point in the eyes of Israeli soldiers, civilians, in order to blind them. It happens on the road to cause traffic accidents, and it also happens in military operations. So, Kacha says, the amount of shooting lasers and wild behavior of the Palestinians here towards IDF forces shows that they are convinced they can do whatever they want here. It's simply unbelievable. Then he says the first 2 weeks after October 7th, the Arabs told themselves the Jews are for sure going to go nuts. Let's keep calm. And we had 2 weeks of relative quiet. That's stoning attacks, no roadside shootings, no violent riots. Incidentally, this claim is contradicted by other sources who say that's not true, that the violence actually started immediately after the October 7th slaughter. But all the same, that's his experience. He said, we had 2 weeks of quiet here, no stoning attacks, no roadside shootings, no violent riots. And then they saw Israel isn't doing anything to them, and that we didn't initiate any serious action, that we're back in the terror containment game. We've seen terrorists, he and his fellow soldiers, we've seen terrorists with our own eyes, and our officer told us, no, you can't initiate contact. They've run back to their village. We can't pursue them. We're not allowed. What does that mean? What does he mean that we can't go after them to their village? The soldier continues. That's what we said about Gaza, because they were inside Gaza until they went out of Gaza to kill us. What does it mean that we can't go after them in their villages to block them from coming into ours and killing us? Then he goes on, Central Command doesn't care. The Arabs are rioting here. They enter our communities. They do whatever they want. They shoot into our communities. They openly conduct surveillance of our communities. They use lasers to blind our soldiers in our positions. They're endangering highway traffic by deliberately driving recklessly. I can attest to that. The day is fast approaching where we will start suffering massive attacks here. No one in the IDF is initiating any action to prevent this. No one is taking it to them. No one is going crazy in their villages and isn't showing them that we're in charge, so they're emboldened. And now they have this fantastic model to follow, Gaza. They're openly organizing to do a redux of the Kibbutz Be'eri massacre against the residents of Judea and Samaria, and the IDF isn't doing anything to prevent it. We soldiers are walking around humiliated and frustrated. We're armed and we're wearing body armor and everything, and despite that, the only ones who walk around with any confidence are the Arabs. They smell our weakness and understand that they have the upper hand. It is going to explode on us on a massive scale. What is going on here? Well, it works out that this isn't by chance. Everything that we're experiencing on the ground in Judea and Samaria, the laser attacks, the undercover of the olive harvests, which I'm going to get into in a second, surveillance of communities, axing attacks, riots, and other things against Israelis. And then, boom, these accusations of settler violence. Nothing is happening by chance. It works out that much of what we're seeing on the ground is organized by an organization called the International Solidarity Movement, which is funded, among other places, by the Muslim Brotherhood and specifically by Hamas and the Hamas branch in Europe. And attesting to that, we have a video that was put out several months ago by the Adkan undercover investigative organization that managed to put one of their members into ISM, essentially as an agent or a spy that was secretly filming what was happening. And so here I just want to show you Paul Arudi. He's an American citizen. He's born in Iran. He actually is very aligned with the Iranian regime and the Syrian regime. And he is the head of ISM in Northern California and really one of the leaders of ISM in general. And here he is talking about the October 7th slaughter by Hamas.
My name is Paul Arudi, and I am the North American General Coordinator for the Global Gathering in support of the choice of resistance. Today, our Palestinian brothers and sisters are teaching a lesson to the Zionists. They are teaching them that they are not merely stones and scorpions that must be cleared from the land in order to fulfill the racist Zionist dream. Every tank and missile in the Zionist arsenal is food taken from the mouths of our children, not only the children of Palestinians.
Our Muslim brother, the money. The person to connect you with might be Zahir Badawi.
Is he a Muslim brother?
He's affiliated. He doesn't say he's in it, but he says he's affiliated. He knows the people there. He knows the people. He knows the leadership in Gaza.
Okay, so here's Paula Rudy praising the Hamas terrorist attack against Israel, and we had it coming, and we deserved it, and this is a glorious thing, etc., etc. So he's applauding it. And this goes then to what's happening in the South Hebron Hills. So Hamas, of course, took a PR hit with, beheading babies and burning them to death and raping women and burning them to death and dismembering families and killing them and all the rest of it, and then taking 240 Israelis hostage to Gaza and doing God only knows what with them. But we certainly know that the Red Cross isn't being given permission to visit any of them. And from the footage that we've seen, these are crimes against humanity that were carried out on October 7th, and every single second that our citizens remain captive in Gaza is another second of another crime against humanity. So we see that that's what's happening. That's kind of a PR hit. It's sort of bad. A lot of people are upset about that. So they have to have a counter-assault. How do they get a moral equivalence between Hamas, which is slaughtering babies, raping women, burning people to death, etc., killed 1,500 Israelis, took another 240 captive. We've only buried, out of the 843 civilians that were clear were killed, we've only buried like 740 because we can't get them enough together to actually bury them because they've been so devastated, the bodies. And we talked about that last week with Avigal Gimpel, and you should check that out if you haven't seen it. At any rate, so how did they compare what they did to Israel? Well, it's simple in a way, which is because lots of people want to believe that Israel's bad. So they start this massive PR campaign to demonize Israelis, and specifically the Israelis everybody's used to hating is the settlers, the extremist settlers, the violent settlers, the ones who commit settler violence, and they're extremists. So here now I'm going to show you another clip. And in this clip, which was filmed by an ISM activist named Allison Russell on October 25th, in the South Hebron Hills. So the South Hebron Hills is an area just south of Hebron. It's a strategic area because it kind of provides territorial contiguity between Judea, South Judea, and then through Judea up to northern Samaria, and the Negev, the Sinai Peninsula, and Gaza. So it's sort of it's the way to combine or to attach Judea and Samaria to the rest of the terror complex in Sinai, in the Negev, and most importantly today to Gaza. So the South Hebron Hills has always been viewed as a strategic target by the Palestinians to try to take over. So they've built illegal communities in the middle of firing ranges of IDF bases, and they've carried out a multi-year campaign to try to demonize the Jewish communities in, for instance, Susia, which is an ancient Jewish farming community that was destroyed by Muslim conquerors around the 8th century, the first Muslim invasion of Israel. At any rate, so this is their hub of operations. And in the clip that I'm going to show you, which was taken on October 25th, most of their volunteers, most of their activists in Israel are either Israeli radical leftists, anti-Zionists, who live, many of them, or 2 out of 3 anyway, live in Arab villages. And one of them, I for sure, named Netta Golan, is married to an Arab, or they're from Western countries. So the clip that I'm going to show you was filmed by an ISM activist named Allison Russell. And in it, we're going to see 2 other ISM activists, one named Mick Bowman, and an Israeli ISM activist named Yasmin Eran Vardi. And they, together with others, are attacking an Israeli military position outside of the Ma'on community in the South Hebron Hills. It's an agricultural community. So they're attacking. They go and they attack the soldiers. This is before what we're seeing filmed. And then what we see, the clip that we're about to see, is when the reservists who are manning the military post come out to try to arrest them, to try to take action against the anarchists, the terrorism supporters or whatever, or terrorists, whatever you want to call them, who are attacking their position. Okay, so that's what we're looking at here. Okay, so what happens is after this clip is taken, Allison Russell posts it on her Facebook page. Later that day, October 25th again, it's posted by the head of the European, the German-funded, the New Israel Fund funded, Ford Foundation funded anti-Zionist organization Breaking the Silence. So the head of Breaking the Silence posts it on her Twitter feed. And then later that day on October 25th, President Biden has this press conference where he talks about extremist violence of Jews in Judea and Samaria, and he refers to these extremist settlers as people who are pouring gasoline on a fire, okay? So this is just hours after ISM provokes IDF forces standing outside protecting the Ma'on farming community in the South Hebron Hills to come out and respond after they were attacked by these ISM, Hamas-funded ISM activists operating in the South Hebron Hills. They attack the Israeli military checkpoint. Oh, and the one very key thing is that in Allison Russell's post, and then also in the Breaking the Silence post, they don't refer to the defenders of the Ma'on farm as IDF forces, even though you can see in the clip they're all wearing uniforms because they're IDF reservists. They refer to them as settlers. So they call them settlers. They say that they're being attacked by settlers, even though what they're being is they're being confronted by IDF forces who they just attacked. So they just attacked them. IDF forces come out, and when they present it to the world on their Facebook posts and on their Twitter posts, they refer to them as settlers, and they say that this was unprovoked, that this is just aggression by settlers who are coming out and attacking these poor ISM volunteers. Incidentally, ISM has a long history of cooperation with terrorist organizations and even with committing terrorism themselves. For instance, famously, the Mike's Place bombing in Tel Aviv, right underneath the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv in 2003, was carried out by two British terrorists who entered Israel as part of an ISM delegation, so that they were either members of ISM in Britain or they joined an ISM delegation to come here and carry out a terrorist suicide bombing adjacent to the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv. At any rate, so, and that's just one. There's a whole slew of other attacks where, that involved ISM members since then. At any rate, so Biden uses the same language essentially as Allison Russell and as Breaking the Silence do in their posts. And how does this happen? Well, they have representatives in Washington contact the State Department, no doubt show them the footage, and within just a few short hours, it went from a provocation of IDF reservists outside of Ma'on farms to Facebook, Twitter, gets sort of, if ISM is considered kind of edgy, Breaking the Silence is supported by left-wing progressive Jews in the United States, the German government, the EU, and other foreign groups. They pick it up, they kosher it, so to speak, and then it goes to Washington. Washington, it goes to the State Department goes to the White House, and it comes out of Biden's mouth that evening in a press conference with Tony Albanese, the Australian Prime Minister. And in the meantime, we had on October 29th, so after Biden opens up the initial volley against the settler violence, we have a statement signed by 22 NGOs funded by Western governments, the New Israel Fund, Ford Foundation, and all the rest of it, call titled Emergency Call to the International Community, Stop the Forcible Transfer in the West Bank. Dateline from the South Hebron Hills on October 29th. We, the undersigned human rights and civil society NGOs in Israel, call on the international community to act urgently to stop the state-backed wave of settler violence, which has led and is leading to the forcible transfer of Palestinian communities in the West Bank. All right. Palestinian farmers, I'm going over something because it's boring, but Palestinian farmers are particularly vulnerable at this time during the annual olive harvest season because if they're unable to pick their olives, they will lose a year's income. So that's not true. That's not their primary source of income, but whatever. So why is it important that they're talking about the olive harvest? I said I'd get back to it. All right, so the olive harvest. What we've been seeing, what I've been seeing over the past several days is more and more reports of very aggressive groups of Palestinians coming up really to the fences, of the perimeter fences of many communities from north to south, from Samaria down to the South Hebron Hills, under the guise of the olive harvest. So 3 weeks ago, this happened in the Benjamin region. There were two Israeli Jewish shepherds who were out tending their flocks, and under the guise of the olive harvest, this mob of Palestinians holding axes came and began attacking them, and one was moderately injured and one was critically wounded in this terrorist attack. And then I think it was last Shabbat, there was a soldier, I think I spoke about this last week, there was a soldier on furlough from the IDF with his family on Shabbat, and they were walking through the family's orchard just outside of the gates of their community of Rechalim, and they were beset also by axe-wielding Palestinians, and the soldier shot in the air, and the Palestinians claimed that he killed one of the people, and there was a whole uproar on Shabbat to the point where Samaria Regional council head Yossi Dagan got a rabbinical permission to the chief rabbi of Samaria to give a statement to the media on Shabbat explaining what had actually happened, because immediately all of the reports started coming out on Shabbat that a settler had murdered innocent Palestinian harvesting olives. So that was last week. And then this week we've seen over this past Shabbat, so that was Shabbat 9 days ago, and this was this last Shabbat, you had shooting into Rechalim, also under the guise of the olive picking. And then over the past 2 days, or 3 days, the community of Migdalim, also in northern Samaria, has been subjected to very, very aggressive surveillance and devastation of olive groves by people claiming to be olive harvesting. But what they're really doing is setting up surveillance posts outside of the community of Migdalim. And this has been going on now for 2 days. Yesterday, a neighbor of mine said that we had the same thing happen in Gush Etzion outside of the community of Neve Dekalim, that you had a very large group, unreasonably large group of people claiming to be coming to the fields to harvest the olives, and they were conducting surveillance and coming right up to the community fence of the community of Neve Daniel in Gush Etzion, supposedly to harvest olives. And and then in the South Hebron Hills, it's happening in a very aggressive way as well. Outside of the community of Kedumim, they saw people with binoculars just, meters from the fence looking in. And then some of the people who have been arrested have been shown to have apps on their cell phones that are in Hebrew that give all of the information about what's happening inside of all of the communities that they're surveying, who lives where, who lives in what house, who are the leaders of the community, etc., so that they're having people's addresses, they're mapping out these communities, they're testing and they're checking the defenses, where are there holes in the fences and where are there not, and they're taking pictures of it all. So this is happening, and then so that's one of the things that's happening. So this is under the olive harvest thing that everybody in these 22 groups, including, by the way, a land for all, 2 states, 1 homeland, Amnesty International, Association for Human Rights, for Civil Rights in Israel, B'Tselem, Beamcomb, Planners for Civil Rights, Breaking the Silence, Combatants for Peace. These are all radical leftist organizations. Women Lawyers for Social Justice, Deir Amim, Jordan Valley activists, Kerem Navot, Mahsom Watch, Mothers Against Violence in Israel, Another Voice, Parents Against Child Detention, Physicians for Human Rights Israel, Policy Working Group, blah, 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 blah. Lots and lots of different ones. Zochrot, 22 groups. So anyway, that's what's happening. They're conducting surveillance of Israeli communities in Judea and Samaria under the guise of the olive harvest. And when any action that Israeli forces or Israeli communities take to try to push them back are immediately filmed, posted online as settler violence against the Palestinians that the U.S. then comes in and attacks and condemns and says that Israel has to take action against the perpetrators. But the perpetrators are actually ISM volunteers or activists that are coming in from abroad to provoke violence that then Israel responds to, and then they tell everybody that the response is actually the provocation that and not the other way around. So, and in all of these cases, according to a lot of the community leaders who are on the scene, and this has been said for many months actually, but that every time that there's a Palestinian provocation like this, and IDF forces respond or first response teams inside of the communities respond, you have a situation where a complaint is made to the U.S. side of the ISM organization operating in Israel. They call up people like Paula Rudy, and there are other lobbyists and activists in the United States who then call their friends in the State Department. The State Department then calls directly to Central Command, which is run by Major General Yehuda Fuchs, who was Israel's military attaché in Washington before he received his appointment to head Central Command. They call him, and then his office calls down to the battalion commander on the ground and says, what are you guys doing? And then everything stops, and these people are allowed to go back into their village, just like the reservist attested to in his frustrated, angry, concerned testimony that was published online this morning by Ayelet Lash on her Facebook page, who's another activist. So obviously all of this needs to stop. You know, the Senate, House should really start investigating. The ISM should be investigating the State Department's links to these organizations that are funded by Hamas, that are aligned with Hamas, that are working with Hamas, and then being used as mouthpieces for their messages, their anti-Israel messages that then get parroted not only by President Biden, but by National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and Vice Secretary of State Tony Blinken, not to mention parroted like throughout the news cycle by all of the mainstream media. And even I see in the Wall Street Journal this morning, there were 2 articles that I read that were referring to settler violence and in other ostensibly conservative news sources that are all parroting these talking points that are being created by terrorism boosters operating in the South Hebron Hills and more broadly throughout Judea and Samaria in order to demonize Israel as a means, again, to develop a fake moral equivalence between Israel on the one hand and these slaughterers from Hamas on the other, these rapists, these child molesters and murderers from Hamas on the other hand. So obviously this could use an investigation by lawmakers who are not members of the Hamas caucus on Capitol Hill. And one more word about that, just for noting. We'll just go back here. Yes. So when I was preparing this monologue, I was looking at ISM's page on NGO Monitor, which is a really important organization that you should check out to see all of the governments that are funding these anti-Israel terror booster organizations. So on the ISM page from NGO Monitor, it shows that ISM was actually under FBI terrorism investigation between 2004 to 2006, probably as a result of the Mike's Place bombing, which again, Mike's Place in Tel Aviv was located adjacent, literally adjacent to the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv. So this was clearly also directed at the United States of America. And so the FBI was investigating ISM. So how did ISM respond to this? Well, they developed lobbying operations in Washington, D.C., and now they have all of the representatives from the Hamas caucus in Washington that's always happy to parrot their talking points. And apparently they also have people like Hadi Ammar, the special representative in the State Department for the Palestinians who has legion ties with Hamas, who are also parroting their talking points. And then we hear them in speeches again by principals, by President Biden, by Tony Blinken. So FBI, reasonable terrorist booster funded by Hamas, European branch, ISM, and they could open an investigation, for instance, now, which would be great. And then one more word. So the Biden administration is saying settler violence, and then they're saying that what we need is a two-state solution. And when Blinken was here last weekend, he met in Ramallah with Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the Palestinian Authority, the head of Fatah, the head of the PLO, and he talked about how America seeks a two-state solution and that the United States is keen to see Abbas come with the Palestinian Authority and take over Gaza on the backs of our soldiers who are now dying in our war to defeat Hamas, to annihilate this Islamo-Nazi organization. And so what Blinken wants to do is get us to free Gaza from Hamas, but he wants us to then give it to the PLO. So just a couple of words about that brilliant concept. So I've spoken a lot about how much the PA is supporting Hamas, how it's acting as Hamas's foreign ministry and defending Hamas at the UN and attacking Israel in the name of Hamas at the UN and in all the international community and capitals around the world through the PLO ambassadors. So just Makori Shon reported today, Monday, that yesterday PA military commanders in Jenin, and I don't know if you remember, but Israel carried out a counter-terror operation in Jenin, which was run by Islamic Jihad and Hamas. So we pushed them out of what's called the refugee camp in Jenin. And then the United States demanded that we transfer control over the city to PA Security Services, and Yuda Fuchs, who's always happy to help them, did just that. So PA Security Services came into Jenin, took over for the first time in many years. And those same U.S.-supported Palestinian security services just gave an ultimatum to Mahmoud Abbas yesterday. Said, you have 24 hours to declare war on Israel and to join the jihad against Israel. And if you don't, then we're going to go into open revolt against you. So that was nice. And then the other thing was that in Hebron, so Jenin is in the north and Hebron is in the south. In Hebron, the Al-Aqsa Brigades, which is a Fatah terrorist organization that is controlled by the Palestinian Authority. Anyway, so the Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, Fatah's organization, again controlled by Mahmoud Abbas, just put out this statement to its members. We have lots of weapons. We've gotten a lot of new weapons, and we want to start doing active attacks against Jews. Come join the jihad. So that came out, I think, yesterday as well. That was in the Makori Shon report today. So that's the PA. That's the security services that the United States supports moving from Judea and Sumeria to Gaza on the backs of our soldiers because they need a two-state solution. And the moderates in the Palestinian society are, of course, the PA. And, you know, they believe in Abbas, who doesn't control anything, including his own forces. And he's going to somehow or another build a Palestinian state that's going to be at peace with Israel. The same Mahmoud Abbas that, you know, is like a Nazi anti-Semite. He denies the Holocaust. He said that Israel's responsible for what happened on October 7th, and his people support October 7th. Mohammed Shtayyeh, his prime minister, I talked about this last week as well. He said they want to form a unity government with Hamas after the war is over, and that Hamas is really great, and they love Hamas, etc. So that's the whole thing. So it starts in the South Hebron Hills with a provocation of IDF forces who then, the people were provoking them, these ISM or ISM-aligned foreigners, radical Israelis and Palestinians provoke. The IDF forces come out to confront them. They're filmed. Then it shows all over the internet. The United States comes in through that chain from ISM to ISM boosters or partners in the United States to the State Department. The State Department comes in, goes to Central Command in Israel, says, stand down, you can't do this, you have to stop, you have to confront the settler violence, and then the IDF does nothing. Then we have the olive pickers under the harvest, and they come and they attack Israelis with axes, and they're surveilling our communities. And as the IDF reservist said, Kibbutz Be'eri-style massacre is just a matter of time. It's being planned. It's right here in plain view, and we're not doing anything about it because the Biden administration comes in and attacks Israel for settler violence. So that's how it all works. And then you say, well, then what's the hand that's guiding U.S. policy in the region? And again, we go back to Paula Rudy's statement that ISM is funded by the Muslim Brotherhood and specifically by Hamas Central Committee member who operates in Europe. So it's all very pretty. We've tied it up in a nice little bow, and we see the line from Hamas to the State Department to the IDF. And we wonder how we got into this pickle. Well, here's an example of how we got into the situation we're in. And now we just have to cut this Gordian knot and annihilate Hamas and move on. And it would be fantastic, for instance, if the United States could stop collaborating with them. Or just one tiny little thing. So when I was looking at this, I also found out one more thing, which is that beginning in August, the State Department began funding a new organization in Gaza that's part of Gaza University. It's called the Phoenix Center for Research and Field Studies. And they are, believe it or not, an adjunct organization of Islamic Jihad, which is the Iranian-Palestinian terrorist organization and Hamas's junior partner in Gaza. And they're also claiming that they're holding some of the Israelis that were taken hostage on October 7th and were absolutely engaged in the slaughter of October 7th. So that's nice. So the United States has given them, they pledged beginning in August, around $100,000 to 2 media programs put out by the Phoenix Center for Research and Field Studies at Gaza University that is an adjunct of Islamic Jihad. So that's another thing that Congress can investigate. But those are the only details I'm going to give you today. You're going to have to wait for the next In Focus for more. We'll leave it there. See you soon. Take care.